Well, it's another magnificent morning. It's about 7:30 and we're up here to do a little bit of watering before it gets too hot, and also I'm going to chop back the bay tree. We've got a multi-stemmed bay at the front of the plot, which every year about this time I give it a real good haircut and put it back into a ball shape, and then leave it for the next year, which means we're going to be inundated with bay leaves again. So I might just tie a load up and put them next to the entrance, see if anybody else wants them. But yeah, I'm going to go make a cup of coffee and then get started. So this is the bay. I always start with the bottom. So this is a really good way of having trees and shrubs, just by, if you lift the canopy, it means that you get access to all the space underneath. So with this bay tree, this used to just be a normal bay tree, you know, going straight from the ground up. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I just stripped the lower stems completely up to about hip height, and then keep the top in a round ball. And underneath we have got hyssop and mint and lemon balm growing, which was completely unavailable space before. So that works out really well. But when you're then repruning, if you always start from the bottom, so don't chop down from the top, start from the bottom and chop upwards, you've got a much better control of the shape. When I did this for a living, this was something that made such a difference to people's gardens. Is if you go kind of a standard terraced back garden and you've got kind of just bushes and shrubs all along the borders, just by lifting the bottom of them up, you can underplant them, and it just, without losing any height, you could change the space completely. Because if you go into a garden and just hack away all the bushes, you're left with then a completely flat 2D space again. You can keep hold of the bushes and just really shape them up. Really nice way to keep the height but make the space available underneath. I never ever prune bay or anything with a large leaf across the leaf, because it will go brown. So if you're pruning something like buxus, it's okay to use sort of a hedge trimmer or something like that. I mean, if you need to, because the leaves are so tiny, it doesn't matter if you cut across them. But with the bay, you just have to take the stem. So I do each stem individually. It doesn't take that long, but the effect on the tree afterwards is just so different. It really makes a difference. So you just cut straight down up to a leaf node, and your bush doesn't look like it's been completely and utterly hacked to death, which is nice. Well, I've got a lot of bay leaves left now, so what I'm going to do is, I mean, I'm not going to save all of them because that's a lot of bay leaves, but I'm going to take a couple of the larger branches and string them up and put them in the netting shed to dry off. I'll also take a couple fresh home with me, and I'll probably put half the rest on the compost heap and hang the rest up at the entrance just to see if anybody else wants any. So I like using bay leaves fresh more than, So I prefer using bay leaves fresh than I do dried. But if I am going to dry them, I tend to grind them as opposed to leaving them whole. So one advantage of that is that you really can use a lot of them, because if you grind them up, obviously you can fit a lot of them into a little tiny jar. So that's what I'm going to do. String them up, let them dry, and then, because it's so hot at the moment, and we've got, what have we got? It's it's 20, so it's 33 today, and then it's going to sort of drop to about 23 in the week, but no rain, and then it's going to go back up. Oh, it's windy. And then it's going to go back up to sort of the early 30s next week. So if I put them in the tin shed, which is the netting shed, they should be dry within the week, and I'll grind them up next week and get them into jars. So yeah, I'm just going to collect it all, string it up, stick it in the shed. I'm only going to take the really long ones of these. The small stuff that I was just using for the shaping will just go straight onto the compost heap. I'm going to tie up these really long stems into 2 bunches. You don't want to have them too big, like I wouldn't attach all this together, because when I hang them up, I want the hot air to be able to dry them out and not kind of clump them together too much so that they go mouldy in the centre. These leaves are really, really lovely. Once they're dried out and put in the spice blender, they'll be perfect. And yeah, it is so hot today. This is lovely. Me, the fish, and the frogs and the snails. This is bliss. Evening. It is what day is it? Thursday evening, and it has been so hot. It's been 32 today. We did come up this morning, but we didn't stay very long because it's like a furnace and we don't get any shade up here first thing in the morning. So we went home, and it's now about 5:30 and the sun's gone over, and it's really nice and cool in here in the polytunnel. So instead of filming the whole thing, I'm just going to do before and after comparison, because I haven't brought anything to hold my phone up with this evening, because I had to carry a ladder, but that's for something happening tomorrow. Yeah, but can you see how tall everything's got? Ooh. So yeah, I'm just going to cut all that back and then give the place a really, really good soak, and yeah, lock it up for the night. I'm going to close the front door but leave the windows open, and then we're going to be up here bright and early tomorrow morning to open up. Right, so you can see a bit of a jumble. The lower half are quite well pruned because I've done that previously, and the tops have just gone nuts. I haven't been keeping on the little offshoots, and in here we've got a couple that have got really big, and they're starting to crowd out the chilies that are underneath. So this has all got to come off. And there we go, loads of air.
Certainly has.
Having really good air circulation around the tomatoes is really important to ward off the blight. And look at this one, I couldn't chop this top off, so I've trained it across the roof. Look how many tomatoes are on this. That's garnet. Fantastic cherry. And now the peppers have all got a bit of space. We only had one major casualty. This one came off, but I'm sure it'll be fine. And this is the result of chopping the tomatoes. Well, that was a bit severe. Have a look how much I've cut off. Morning. It is not so hot today, and we're up here just before lunch to get something to eat, basically. These are kestrel potatoes, so a second early, and they are a pretty good size. So there's a bit of scab, they're not completely clean, but there's a lot of them off the one plant. Pretty pleased with that. You can see, so this one is really clean, totally fine, but this one has got a bit of scab. See those brown patches? But the good thing about scab is that it makes the best skin on chips, because it's like slightly rough surface. It just becomes super crispy. Another job for today, I've got the next generation kohlrabi to go in. Quite good looking plants. These have been at home. They're going to go into this bed actually where the previous set of kohlrabi have been. So I'm just going to, rather than wait for the whole of the kohlrabi to be harvested, we've harvested like most of them, and I'm going to put these 6 in this side. I have another 6 to go in, so once I've picked the other 2, I'll put the other 6 in. But it's just kind of trying to get a bit of succession going. I'm going to plant these right up, bury the whole stem up to the leaf node, up to the first set of leaves. The other thing about with brassicas, I really hate being loose in the soil. Bury them deep and really firm them in. Okay, so that's the next set of 6. What I've also got to put in today is some kohlrabi that I have swapped for some other seedlings that I had at home. They're going to be dotted around these cabbages. So we've harvested 3 of these cabbages so far, and again, like the kohlrabi, I'm just going to dot them in. So I've got a long space across this edge. I'll put 3 in here. These need a bit more space than the kohlrabi do, because these are going to be kohlrabi and they get tall. These are the nasturtium seeds when they're green. I don't eat nasturtium leaves and flowers because the taste is too strong. I'm not that keen on it, but these pickled are phenomenal. They're also known as poor man's capers, although they don't actually taste anything like capers. And when they get to this stage, I'm just going to leave these ones scattered in here because they will be my nasturtiums for next year. So like I say, the kohlrabi are going to be much wider spaced than the kohlrabi. This is a real shame about this kind of plastic pot. I mean, I do buy plastic pots, they have their uses, they're brilliant, but I always make sure I buy really thick ones that are going to last years. I mean, I've got some of these cellular trays that I've had for like 9 years. Go for the quality ones that you know are going to last. In this bed I've also got these pak choi coming along, and I've got the curly kale and the cavallonero, which I'm about to pick now, but I think we're going to have to do it pretty quick and head home because the sky is looking menacing right now. The storm's definitely on its way. a look at him. Beauty. So picking a bit of beetroot today. These are coming good. We had really rubbish germination with these, so they're all at different stages because I had to keep infilling with more sowings. But they're coming good now. Got a couple of big beasts in there.
See, that one's got one coming. That one's got nothing around it, but that one's got something just next door. Do you want to hold the other one in?
That's not going to do anything, that one. I don't think so.
Oh, yeah, what about the other one, the one behind you?
They might do. I'll put that back in, but... Nice.
1, 2.
A bit close.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good size. That's a nice size one. That's what size you want them, really. It's a bit big.
Something else is we're getting a lot of honeybees coming to drink in the pond, so I've made a bee watering station. It's just a shallow dish with stones in it and water so that they can get out. And have a look at this. The water lily that we planted a couple of weeks ago is flowering. Sunday morning, and we are going to try and tackle the whitefly problem that we've got in the brassica cage. Well, the fruit cage, which is being the temporary brassica cage this year. We have had the Asturian cabbage trees in that patch of land for about 3 years now. This is its 3rd summer, and they have been sat there from before the fruit cage was there, so we built the fruit cage around them. And they started off getting, you know, when you've got whitefly, you get that kind of black sooty because it's all the sap. They started off with that, and they've spread it to everything else. So at the moment, it's like an absolute whitefly paradise. So we are pretty anti using any kind of, well, in fact, we don't use any pesticides. So it's basically just a case of going at them with the hose and a sponge. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Luckily, it's pretty nice warm weather because it's a bit of a miserable job to be doing in the wet, I can tell you. So yeah, let me go and show you what they're looking like now because it's not pretty. Right, step into the whitefly palace. So these are all the brassicas. These are the tree cabbages. You can see that black, nasty, messy soot everywhere. And they are just completely covered, basically. So here we've got, these are the earlier calets, like what I planted yesterday down there, but these ones are been in the ground about 2 months. They're covered. These are purple sprouting. This is a white sprouting. Generally, how we try and deal with everything is either introduce natural predators for something, or it's just a manual either deterrent or picking them off. So with the brassicas, it's always netting over the top to stop the cabbage white. Oh look, we got an asparagus. This used to be an asparagus bed years ago. If they do get on, it's just regular checking for caterpillars, taking them off, feeding them to the chickens. And it's the same thing that I'm going to do here with the whitefly. It's just manual washing it off. But the turnips are looking strong. In the water, I'm just going to put a tiny bit of washing up liquid. It just, you know, helps a bit with the washing. Only an absolute, like this whole bucket of water, I'm just going to put like a drop in, hardly any. Well, that's got most of it off. I mean, they're still flying around, and they're going to settle again. But it's the majority of them came off, all of the like the sticky stuff off the back and the eggs and the larvae and the young ones. So yeah, they're looking much better anyway. I'm going to take a couple of these turnips home with me today. These have been done in like the multi-sow kind of way, where you have 3 plants in a cell tray and you plant them out as a 3 rather than separating them. It's working pretty well. The most dominant plant will grow fastest, and then so you take that one out and then it's the next most dominant plant and it carries on, so you end up getting 3 harvests like this one. Can you see we've got 1 fatty and 2 that aren't doing much? When I take this fatty out, one of the other 2 will step up and become the dominant one, so then I'll harvest from that, and then you get 3 harvests in the same space that you would get 1. Pretty happy with that. Next thing I've got to do, which I'm quite excited about, is going to go and pick 2 of the Bulgarian beefsteak tomatoes that are ready in the polytunnel. Okay, talking of pretty happy, have a look at these boys.
Look at that.
Morning. It is Monday. It's a lot cooler today, and so I'm doing a bit of sort of tidying in the greenhouse. I don't know if you remember when I tied up the melons and the cucumbers behind me up onto the ceiling. I mean, that's working out really well. But the cucumbers have had a bit of a hard time with the sun, because they're on the side of the greenhouse where the sun actually shines in, and they've got a little bit burnt, whereas the melons that have been sort of shaded by the cucumbers are absolutely loving it. So I'm just going to have a bit of a tidy around. I've moved, can you see the shading? I had it up the other end. I've moved it across this way to protect the cucumbers specifically, and I'm just going to give the cucumbers a bit of a trim, take off the worst of the burnt foliage, give them a feed, and see how they do. They're still producing masses of cucumbers, it's just that they're looking a bit frazzled. So I'm going to give them a bit of a tidy. Can you see these leaves? I mean, I've taken quite a lot off here, but the ones that have been sort of touching the glass at the back are just crisps, absolute crisps. So I've been cutting them off. You can see this one, I've cut all the deep fried cucumber leaves off, and then up here where it's been in the shade, they're still looking lush. So hopefully it will green up down below, but they're still looking fine, and there's masses of cucumbers all over them. So I'm not worried, it's more an aesthetic thing really, just to chop them all off and get a bit more light coming through. But you can see the melons are absolutely happy as Larry on the other side of the greenhouse. We've got melons everywhere. Back up in the salad bed this afternoon, just going to plant out some Valmain lettuce that I've got. I'm not going to separate these out. I'm going to plant them in sort of clumps and just chop them off at the base when they're ready and use the whole lot, rather than trying to encourage each individual plant to kind of form its own head. Look, this is our own sieved compost. Look how much movement there is in there. There's so many things living in it. It's fantastic. Well, that was a hot week. It's a bit cooler today, but it's going to ramp back up again to the 30s next week. So there's going to be a lot of watering. That's basically going to be the main job. We're just coming to the end of the mulberries now, which has just been, it's been an amazing year for mulberries. And I was quite pleased to have registered my tree with Morris Londinium, which is a website that tracks mulberry trees in London, because there's quite an interesting history with the two, with the tree in London. So that was really nice to get that registered on their website. The other exciting thing that I don't know if I'm going to be cracking on with it next week or just in the planning stages, but we've decided to extend where the tin shed was, where I hung the bay leaves, and where the polytunnel is coming out. We're going to extend all of those beds right the way forward so that the path width on that left hand side of the plot is the same as the main drag, and so that's going to give us about another 10-12 square meters of growing area. And I'm going to be putting in herbs there, perennial herbs, so sages, all the different sages. We've got the purple sage and green sage. I've got them as cuttings already waiting in the cold frame to go in. Got a new rosemary to go in there, and a hyssop. I'm going to take a load of cuttings from other places across the allotment site of particularly good varieties of herbs. I've got some pineapple sage here with me at home, so I'll take a load of cuttings of that, because the position that it's in here, I need to take it out because we have a very, very small back garden and it's absolutely vast. So I'm going to whip that out, take a load of cuttings and get them in at the allotment. Basically, like, we're only halfway through this year and already the planning begins for next. But that's how it goes, isn't it? It's quite exciting. Yeah, because we're getting to the kind of stage now where everything's already going, you know. Now it's just maintaining it, washing a lot of bugs off, picking off caterpillars, making sure everything's well watered, and then it's feeding the polytunnel and the greenhouse, and that's about sort of where we are. So sorry about all the screaming that's going on. That's kids next door. Something exciting is happening, but I can't quite make out what it is. I've pulled the peas out. Do you remember when I chopped the peas back before to see if they would come back? I did get a second flush of them, but not anything like their first flush. So I've pulled them out, and I'm going to possibly sow some more. I'm really not sure. But I've been doing quite a lot of thinking about what we're going to be growing over winter, because we want to use the polytunnel for winter crops. I'm going to be putting chard and spinach in there. And also we're sort of prepping which beds we're going to be putting the green manure in this year. We've had a bit of sporadic success with green manure over the years, but what with all the problems that we had with the aminopyralid in the organic horse compost, the horse manure that we had, trying to kind of pare that back a bit and using alternative ways. So we're going to be using a lot more of our own compost, trying to make as much of that as is feasibly possible, and growing green manure. So I'll probably be chatting quite a lot of stuff about green manure next week, because I'm just deciding what I'm going to grow in which beds, and having a look at what's going to be good for what crops, which means that I also have to be planning what's going to be in which beds next year. Yeah, so that's sort of what I'm going to be doing. But other than that, it was a really nice week. Beautiful hot weather, got quite a lot done, but mainly obviously now we're just into picking mode. The tomatoes have been unbelievable this year. It's Tomato Tuesday over on Instagram today, obviously with it being Tuesday. So the whole of Instagram is just flooded with fantastic pictures of people's tomatoes, which is a real joy. But basically that's this week done. Yeah, so as always, if you enjoyed it, please hit the thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed already, please do. That's really fantastic if you can do that. And I will see you this time next week on here. Oh, Mum and I are trying to get together to do a tomato tasting, because we've got all these different varieties of tomatoes this year. We're trying to get that done. So hopefully that will be appearing at some point. So yeah, watch out for that, and I'll see you next Tuesday.